Hello, everyone. I'm Harvey Brownstone, and today's special guest is a singer-songwriter, musician, actor, and radio host who's been entertaining audiences since he was a child actor on Coronation Street. After studying at the Manchester School of Music, where he won the Outstanding Young Musician Award, he became an international superstar at the age of 15 as lead singer of the phenomenally popular British pop band Hermits, selling over 60 million records and 7 gold albums with 14 gold hit singles, including I'm Into Something Good,
Woke up this morning feeling fine. There's something special on my mind. Last night I met a new girl in the neighborhood. Whoa, yeah. Something tells me I'm into something good. Something tells me I'm into something.
Can't You Hear My Heartbeat,
Every time I see you looking my way, baby, baby, can't you hear my heartbeat? In the car or walking down the highway, baby, baby, can't you hear my heartbeat?
Mrs. Brown, You've Got a Lovely Daughter,
Mrs. Brown, you've got a lovely daughter. There's the sharpest here are something rare. But it's sad, she doesn't love me now. She's made it clear enough, it ain't no good to buy.
Silhouettes,
Took a walk and past your house late last night. All the shades were pulled and drawn way down tight from within a dim light cast. Two silhouettes on the shade. Oh, what a lovely couple they made.
Wonderful World,
Don't know much about history. Don't know much biology. Don't know much about science books. Don't know much about the French I serve. But I do know that I love you. And I know that if you love me too, what a wonderful world this would be.
I'm Henry VIII, I Am,
I'm Henry VIII, I am. Henry VIII, I am. I got married to the widow next door. She's been married 7 times before, and everyone was an Henry. She wouldn't have a Willie nor a son. I'm a right old man, I'm Henry. Henry VIII, I am.
There's a Kind of Hush,
And there's a kind of hush all over the world. Tonight, all over the world, you can hear the sound of lovers in love. You know what I mean?
The End of the World,
Why does the sea rush to shore? Don't they know it's the end of the world when you don't love me anymore?
and many more. Herman's Hermits were twice named by Cashbox Magazine as Entertainer of the Year, and they opened the 1970 Royal Variety Performance at the London Palladium. Our guest has appeared on hundreds of TV shows, including Ed Sullivan, Jackie Gleason, Dean Martin, Sonny and Cher, Laverne and Shirley, Quantum Leap, Married with Children, and of course, as Paddington on the ever-popular As the World Turns. And he starred in TV movies including The Canterville Ghost, Pinocchio, and Dick Whittington, as well as a number of feature films including Mrs. Brown, You've Got a Lovely Daughter, Hold On, When the Boys Meet the Girls, Never Too Young to Rock, and the unforgettable Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. As a solo artist, he recorded the hit singles Oh You Pretty Things, Meet Me on the Corner Down at Joe's Cafe, and I Think I'm Over Getting Over You, as well as his solo album, One of the Glory Boys. He also conquered London's West End and Broadway, playing the role of the dashing young hero Frederick in The Pirates of Penzance, which he took on tour all over the world. And when he's not performing concerts before sold-out audiences, he's hosting his own immensely popular show on Sirius XM's 60s Gold Station. I'm delighted to welcome the extraordinarily multi-talented Peter Noone to our show. Peter, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, nice to see you, Harvey.
Peter, one of the most incredible, unique things about you is that you achieved immense success and fame at such an early age. I mean, you were only 15 and you were already a TV star in England at the age of 12. You don't come from a showbiz family. Your father was an accountant. How did you handle being famous so early in life? I mean, you were the same age as your fans.
You know, I think I was overeducated for the position I was in. I had very good teachers at school and I was kind of okay and I knew who I was. I think it was easy to handle it because I managed it kind of all by myself. It's hard to explain that, but, you know, like the first band, I was part of the operations. So it wasn't like I was a pop star, a teen idol with some woman who booked all my flights and hotel rooms and all that. I didn't have that. I had to do everything myself. And people from the period had a new sort of independence that, first of all, it was safe everywhere. So my parents could let me go wherever I want and thought I would be safe. And of course I was. And that's why I'm still here. But I think how I handled it was that I'm quite persistent, and the things that I wanted to happen sometimes took 10 years, but I didn't quit persisting. You know, you mentioned Broadway. When I left Herman's Hermits in 1973, it was because I thought I could do Broadway shows and stuff like that, but I couldn't get a Broadway show because I had one missing element, which was talent. I couldn't dance and I couldn't sing Broadway type songs. And, you know, I was Herman. And it took me 10 years of dance classes and sword fencing and, you know, épée, different kind of sword fencing to finally get a gig on Broadway. And meanwhile, I was doing lots of things. I've always been a jack of all trades, master of none, dilettante. So I was able to fill in all the spare times like today, you know, I mean, I do stuff all the time. I'm always constantly doing stuff. I'm probably going to be doing stuff while I'm talking to you, which I know is rude, but it just comes to me, you know, with email and stuff like that. I didn't have any of that then. So I would have an idea and I would store it in my hard drive of my brain and I would keep adding to it until it was software. And
I'll do my best to keep your attention. Your first,
you can.
Your first two hit singles, I'm Into Something Good and Show Me Girl, were written by the fabulous Carole King and Jerry Goffin. How did you get connected with them?
You know, it's Mickey Most who got the song for us. We were auditioning for him and he thought he had this song that he thought would be a good song. So we drove up to London one Thursday and we recorded it in 3 hours. The A side and the B side, and it was the Carole King song. And first of all, everybody in Herman's Hermits were massive fans of Jerry Goffin and Carole King because of their previous works. So we were excited and we recorded it quickly and it came out quickly. I think it was out the next week and it immediately went to #1 in England. And Carole King and Jerry Goffin had another song for us and it was called The Girl from Chelsea, I think maybe what it was called, or Show Me Girl, what it was. And we recorded that one quickly again. And at the time, Mickey Most didn't think it was a #1 record. And of course it wasn't. It was kind of a dud. Although we liked it and everything, it had the same sort of energy as I'm Into Something Good, that kind of boyish charm. So then we immediately made Silhouettes, which was the perfect pop song to fix the damage of a failed one.
Do you still open every concert with I'm Into Something Good? I've seen you many times and you always start with that song.
I always start with it because it puts me in the mood for the Panglossian event where, you know, you suspend all reality at a Hermits concert and hopefully what happens to me when I go to a concert. Like if I see Tom Jones and he sings It's Not Unusual, I remember seeing him sing it for the first time. And I'm sure everybody does that. When they hear a song, they're transported back to in the car with their grandparents. You know, I Spy with My Little Eye, Henry, and stuff like that. So, you know, it's naively optimistic is who I am. And it's worked out well for me because I feel much younger than I actually am.
Herman's Hermits had such a long string of hit records, and they were feel-good songs, Peter. They weren't the Eve of Destruction type songs. Was that a deliberate decision to record upbeat songs?
Yeah, because we were those people. You know, you can only record songs that you think fit. So all those songs fitted the general atmosphere within the organization. You know, it was a small organization. We had a manager, 2 managers, an agent, and Mickey Most. That was the total organization. And they obviously fought with each other all the time. But I realized that Mickey Most was my number one asset, if you like to. It was also my best friend. He was the best man at my wedding. He's the godfather of my daughter. You know, he was my best friend. He was my best friend. So we created records without letting anybody know, really. You know, Silhouettes, I think only Carl and Keith were at the session. Carl Green and Keith Hopwood, they did the background vocals. And that's the way we would do it. We slowly started to, when we thought it was something that needed to be rushed, we would get in the best players in the world. Like, for example, Silhouettes is Vic Flick on lead guitar, and it's Bobby Graham on drums, and there's all kinds of. It was music of the moment. Remember, we were making music for that week.
Well,
so that week didn't include Eve of Destruction for us. That wasn't on our program. So our program was, you know, woke up this morning feeling fine, you know, and Mickey Most used to say, the producer used to say, let's speed it up a bit because this is the song that's going to come on right after the news. And the British news in the 60s, bow, boom, pound meets reach all-time low, boom. You know, just horrible news. So then we woke up this morning, something is happening. Don't know much about history. There's the kind of heart. All the songs were perfect for after the news, and that's who we were. We were those guys who suspended reality for 3 minutes.
Is it true that you recorded Henry VIII as a joke, never thinking it would become a big hit?
Well, it was. We only did it once. We only played it once, and that's the record. So we didn't know that it would be a single, for example, but we didn't know that Mrs. Brown, You Got a Lovely Daughter was going to be a single. Suddenly, these records that we were just doing for fun in the studio. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that was just recorded for fun that became hit. I'm Leaning on a Lamppost. We did it as a joke in a movie because they'd put us in a spaceship to go to the moon or something. And the director, Arthur Lubin, who was a fantastic guy, Arthur Lubin had also done the Three Stooges. So we were big fans of his, and he'd done Mr. Ed. And we kind of, a bit punkish, really, we decided that, he said to me, song, you know, you're in this spaceship going into the space, and the spaceship is called Herman's Hermits. And we went, oh my God, what kind of a script is this? I wish we'd read the script rather than reading the numbers on the contract. And I said, well, how about Leaning on a Lamppost? Because, you know, that doesn't make sense. And he goes, lean on a lamppost in a spaceship? I said, our fans will understand. And our fans would understand that we were making fun of him. And it was kind of unkind in a way, but it worked out good. Nobody ever questions, wait a second, you're in a spaceship leaning on a lamppost, and you've got the Hermits hanging by wires all day. And everything that happened to us has a story. Herman's Hermits, because it was a boy band. Only we didn't know we were boys. We thought we were adults.
Well, I remember seeing you sing Henry VIII on the Ed Sullivan Show. And immediately after that, Peter, it was being played on the radio constantly, and everyone was singing the song. The Ed Sullivan Show had an amazing impact on your career in America, didn't it?
Well, yeah, we did that. When we did Henry VIII on the Ed Sullivan show, I remember we were staying in a hotel, and we were standing on top of the parking lot, I think on Lexington. And a couple of the Stones were there, and Andrew Oldham, who was the Stones' genius boy wonder manager, and Tom Jones and his manager. And we looked over the edge on Lexington Avenue, and there were literally, I don't exaggerate, now it'd be billions, but there were thousands of girls and boys in the street singing Henry VIII to the Stones and Tom Jones and Herman. Me was the only member of Herman Hermits there, but it was a big deal. Henry VIII was a big deal because it was fun. And, music had until then been about romance and broken romance. And it wasn't, we would listen to The Times They Are A-Changing, but it was still a pop song to us. Teenagers didn't have any depth. We were paddling in a swimming pool water this deep. Yeah. And that was the joy of music then, remember. I got that record the other day, happy, and I go, that's the same idea as Herman's Hermits, whatever his name is, that guy played Happy, and then disappeared. But I think music of the moment is an important thing, because the Beatles were making music of the moment. Remember, the Beatles they'd do Rain, and then they'd drive out to the studio in Hayes to make sure that they didn't squash it. Don't squash it. Don't squash this. Don't compress it. We want it to be as loud as it is. And because they knew that record would be on the radio in 24 hours. It wasn't 6 years or 1 year or for the album, And when you say in 1965, we were the Cashbox, like the #1 selling recording act in the world. And that was because the Beatles were making Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. They were gone all that year in the studio. They weren't touring, and they weren't releasing a load of singles. And we had 1965, MGM in America released 11 singles.
Yeah, I know. You sang Mrs. Brown, You Have a Lovely Daughter in an English accent. What was the thinking behind that?
Well, when we first started to do it, we did it at the Cavern, and I was a schoolboy, and we played at the Cavern in Liverpool. And just to be entertaining, I would dress up. I'd do Millie's My Boy Lollipop, and I'd dress up as Millie, and I'd do Mrs. Brown, You Got a Lovely Daughter, and I'd dress up as Peter Noone in school uniform, because the story leans towards a play. A young boy walks up to the house. He's looking for a girl. He's got a bouquet of flowers. He knocks on the door, and oh no, her mother answered the door. What's he going to sing? Mrs. Brown, You've Got a Lovely Daughter, girls are shy, but he said she doesn't love me. Here's the, and it just, so we always, right from the beginning, we knew that the only way we could make it was to be unique and different from everybody else. And nobody else was doing My Boy Lollipop at the Cavern. None of the other groups were doing that. So we did that. And then we would do Mother-in-Law by Ernie K. Doe, because no other groups were doing that either. So when we got to the studio, remember, lots of the early LPs were just songs that we played live. And lots of them didn't get on because other people did better live versions. Like the Beatles did a great version of Roll Over Beethoven, so we left that one out.
Well, you talk about other people. When I was doing my research for this interview, I discovered that a lot of singers recorded There's a Kind of Hush, but it was your version that really took off and became a massive hit. Why do you think that was?
We don't know much about those other versions of it, but we thought ours was the version. I can remember recording it, and we were not sure about the song. There were elements of it that we weren't sure about. Now I'm convinced that it's a brilliant song, a great thing, just a great ensemble of all the parts. So we weren't sure if it should start off, There's a Kind of Hush All Over the World, which is the chorus, but it's also the verse. It's like, it has no verses. Most songs go, woke up this morning, feel something tells me. This one goes start straight with the song. There's a kind of hush all over the world. That's the song, right? And then it goes around. And we weren't sure, but John Paul Jones, who was our friend, who was a bass player at the time and a phenomenal arranger, sat down and wrote an arrangement for There's a Kind of Hush, you know, which is the da 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 da, and we recorded it at Abbey Road or one of those upstairs downstairs studios in London. And I remember that the orchestra were in another room, but me and the rhythm section, we sang it live with John Paul Jones playing bass and conducting the orchestra basically with a Fender Precision bass, and his face. He was conducting the orchestra with his face. We kept that original bass, and then he overdubbed it again, and I double tracked they kept the original vocal, which is really weird, and I just double tracked it and listened to it, and we said, blimey, it's a blinking number one. And you know, it was just the finished product. Sometimes if you listen to the demo, it doesn't have any life in it. And he did the same to No Milk Today. Lots of people had a go with No Milk Today, but our version had John Paul Jones, who put that da 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 da, you know, our brilliant strings and stuff. So lots of things like There's a Kind of Hush. We found out when we released it that there was somebody else had released it in America, some Danny and the Juniors or something in Ohio, and that caused it not to be a number one in America, really, because there were different versions being played, you know, and those days radio and sales, you know. But I will say that what I've come to realize in my maturity is that not many people thought I'm Henry VIII. I am. Maybe 10 million people, 10 million people bought it. And since then, 50 million streams. But a lot of people know the song because of radio in those days. Like you said, they had Ed Sullivan show, and if you got on that and you were on the radio, that included everybody. Nowadays, you cannot include everybody in everything because they're all disparate. Like you see a car going on the freeway in Florida, and there's two kids in the back on the headset, and the mother has got an iPad out, looking at the map, directions, whatever, and he's listening to Rush Limbaugh or something, you know what I mean? Or whoever is the flavor of the month for those older men. So older men being in over 30. So everybody's separated now, you know, and I go, well, my musical education was my grandparents, my parents, the radio in their house, the radio in their car. And of course, because of that, there's a lot of Henry VIII's and Any Old Irons and Mrs. Brown, you know, those kind of songs in there. English music hall songs, we can call them. A lot of jazz, you know, my father liked Woody Herman and the Thundering Herd. And he was a trombone player. And whenever we had a death in the family or a christening or a baptism or a wedding, we would all congregate in a room called the parlor, which was not really a parlor, it was just a small room, but it had a piano in it and a settee and no chairs. And everyone would go in there and they'd all have a drink, remember, because we were Irish. And they would have a drink and they would have a wake. And then my dad would play the trombone. His brother Lawrence would play the trumpet. My Auntie Mary could play Fats Waller. So we'd do some Fats. My very good friend, the milkman said. And we'd go round and round, music go around. You know, we'd get some different kinds of songs, a lot of Irish ballads. And, you know, I call it, the band played Waltzing Matilda, you know, although that wasn't around at the time. There were lots of those sort of dramatic, happy, sad, weepy songs that sing with a smile on their face and then cry at the end. There's a lot of emotion in that parlor.
Yes, well, you come from a very rich background musically. I know that for many years, people thought your name was Herman, and you would even sign Herman when fans asked for autographs. When you were young, did you see Herman and Peter as two different people?
Yes, I think I did. I think I did, and it really was. It was a good. See, the name, although it's got the true story, is a guy in a pub gave us the name. He thought I looked like Herman from the Bullwinkle Show, and he meant Sherman because I had these horn rim glasses on. What happened was that we were a boy band, but we didn't really want to be a boy band. We didn't want to like go in competition with a boy band. We wanted to compete with entertainers. So the name Herman gave, no girl would ever scream Herman, is what we thought. That if we chose an unromantic name for the band, if we'd called ourselves the Lovers, we would have been all over very quickly. So we thought that we could make a joke name and keep it light, which worked against us, because, if you keep it light, you make a choice early on in music. Like, am I going to sing like Big Bill Broonzy, or am I going to sing like Bobby V? And I thought, I'm going to go with Bobby V, Buddy Holly, Tommy Rowe, those guys, because I think that's more attractive to me than I gotta have a little,
That was a good choice.
It wasn't bad, I know, but that's better than I was when I was 15. Then it would have been, I'm on the road again.
No, you made the right choice.
We chose to be pop singers. We needed a pop name. And at the time there was, there were loads of people called Jerry and the Pacemakers, Freddie and the Dreamers, and we would be Herman and the Hermits. You see, it was like a perfect. And then there was a band called Farron's Flamingos, who we love. Farron's Flamingos was a band playing at the Cavern all the time, really good, and that made Herman's Hermits seem more attractive. That's more. The next wave will be not Jerry and the Pacemakers, Freddie and the Dreamers, Herman and the Hermits. It'll be Jerry's Pacemakers, Freddie's Dreamers, and so we eventually got rid of all the Peter Noone element of it all, and which opened up that door where I could go and do things as Peter Noone, and I could also do things as Herman, and that opened up massive amount of. It was very stressful because people would call me Herman when I wanted them to call me Peter Noone, and people would call me Peter when I wanted to call me Herman, because after 1 year of being famous, all the people who buy the records know that my name isn't Herman anymore.
Right.
And by 1966, my mother had changed the name of her son from Peter to Herman. My son Herman from Herman's Hermits, which was, okay, that's more famous than Peter Noone. And then for the next 10 years, I worked on how I could withdraw and have people. Herman is Peter Noone is Herman is the thing.
You did it very successfully. Now, of course, everyone knows that you were a major part of the British invasion, which started with the Beatles. You knew them well, even before they were famous. And you've often said that John Lennon was the most accessible for you of all the Beatles. Can you tell us a bit about your friendship with him?
Well, he was more accessible because I think he was like, Paul was dating some doctor's daughter. George was dating, George was dating some model, and Ringo had Maureen already, and he was sort of on the loose, really. He was the man about town. He was the only one who, I think what would happen would they'd finish working at Abbey Road and at midnight or something, and then he'd go to the local nightclubs, and he was very, very friendly guy. And how I got to know him was I was in Leicester Square. I mean, this is all English stuff, Leicester Square, and I saw his car pull up that I was going to. And I knew his driver. His driver was called Terry Doran. And I knew Terry. And hello, you just hello. Oh, Terry. Hello, kind of. Everybody knows who he is, right? So he got in the lift. And when the lift opened inside the club, everybody thought I was with them. We all got out they all arrived in the elevator. There's one of the Beatles. He sees me. I'm invisible now. So's Terry Doran. We have now become invisible because John Lennon is in the viewfinder. Oh, there's John Lennon. So we're invisible. So they seat us together. And I know I'm not invited. So I sort of stand there and go, well, you know, what do I do? Remember, I'm 17 years old. What shall I do? And John says, last one to sit down is an egg. What does that even mean? So I sat down. And then the cocktail waitress came over and she looked at me. And when I was 17, I looked 11. I'd already 11. I could get. So she looks at me and she can't say the magic, are you 18? Because it's a ridiculous question. So she says, in deference to the Beatle, there's a 2-drink minimum. And everybody has to have 2 drinks. So John said, great, I'll have 2 Bacardis and Hermit will have 2 Cokes. And she goes and she brings them back and he gives me 1 Bacardis and I give him 1 of my Cokes. And now we're drinking buddies. Not a word was said that night because the music was so loud in there, and he was definitely attentive to the music, the quality of the speakers. And we sat there and we had a few drinks and there was no, people didn't, which was kind of amazing. You know, you had loads of people. Nowadays, people would be all over it, you know, all over everybody. But in those days, it was a pretty sophisticated audience sitting in the nightclubs in London. You know, not that one, but I would go to another called The Bag of Nails, and you see Ginger Baker, John Paul Jones, and Eric Clapton and Paul McCartney, and they'd all be sitting around, and they were having a drink. You know, that no one was smoking pot yet, and it was all, you know, the girls were still the girls, the boys. Everybody was happy. You know, Twiggy was on a table, and Mary Quant was on a table, and we you know, we didn't have anything to talk about to each other. You know, it's before politics became the business of every musician. Then we didn't know about, you know, I think we all knew who the president of the United States was, but we didn't know who the Speaker of the House was or any of the other stuff that people know nowadays. You know, who used to be the president and who wants to be the president. We didn't know any of that. So we kind of would just give peace a chance, people. You know what I mean? We thought, you know, someone will come along who can fix all this. But we didn't know that we would be inspirational to thought.
Well, you were, I'll tell you. Now, as you know, there's been a lot written about the music of the 60s, Peter. It was a very special and unique era in the history of pop music. And you talk about this a lot on your show on SiriusXM. Have you ever been able to figure out what it is about the music of the 60s that just keeps generation after generation of music fans still listening to that music?
I think the music of the 60s was a conglomeration, I don't know the right, of the 30s, 40s, 50s, all the inspiration for 60s artists, those 3 decades beforehand. And the 30s, 40s, 50s, and Beatles were number 1 in the charts at the same time as Sound of Music was in the charts. And I think Sound of Music was in the charts for as many weeks as the Beatles. And all the music, we all listened to each other's music. That's what it is. I think it was before the 60s music was, you heard it everywhere, remember? It was free. This is going to get me again, but music used to be free. No, it was never free. It was free. You would hear it for the first time for free. No matter who you were, you would hear it for free. You'd hear it on a jukebox, and the man who put the quarter in the jukebox didn't go around the cafeteria asking everybody for a nickel for the song he wanted to play. And so all the songs meant something to people from the 30s, 40s, and 60s. Like if you listen to Paul McCartney, you know that he's got the same inspiration as Herman's Hermits, that it's all of that stuff. And somehow during the 60s, people began to suppose that because they're famous, that they're counted for more than popularity. And we didn't buy into that. We always made songs that, you know, I used to say, Mickey Mouse started it, he would say to me, do it again. I go, I can't do it better than that. He goes, I don't believe you. Meaning, I don't believe you on that last performance. So go back there and sing it as if you're singing it to Mrs. Brown. Okay. And that was an element that we always thought that we heard ourselves on the radio. Remember, we made records to get on the radio, not to sell millions of records, because if they didn't get on the radio, you wouldn't sell any. We were all led to the radio. That was the feeding thing. What happened was that a lot of those people, the songs that they wrote were of their moment, and they were all, you know, there's a kind of hush all over the world. What was Jeff's? And he also wrote Winchester Cathedral. They're not really the same songs, same chords, but they're not the same songs. He came up with both of those things. It must have been, I think, when I listened to the record on the radio, I hear Winchester Cathedral. You can see the cathedral there. He's walking along the street, and and most songs from the 60s, you don't need a great, I think people used to do their own screenplay. You know, it's before videos and stuff like that. People used to do their own screenplay of what was really happening when this whole world starts getting me down. You could imagine yourself on a roof with a cat, but you could imagine yourself on a roof and under the boardwalk. No idea what a boardwalk was, but we could imagine, we could create it. And once we saw one, we knew exactly what a boardwalk was, you know, Atlantic City. So all the songs, I think of my sister, you know, she's no longer with us, but I had an older sister, and from her bedroom, I had the bedroom next to her. But from her room, I would hear all her life stories. You know, if she was playing It's My Party, she would play It's My Party by Leslie Gore 500 times. It was non-stop. She had a record player that would keep repeating it. And she would play It's Over, It's Over, It's Over by Roy Orbison. And my father, at the end of it, this is my over, it's over, it's over, it's over, it's over. It never is over. But when it was over, my father, and she would play it 100 times a day, my father would shout up the stairs, thank Christ for that it's over. Meant the record's over. So even he's involved in the making of a brilliant record, because it gave him a chance to connect to, and you know, he once said, what does Bebopalula even mean? I said,
Nobody knew.
They don't want you to know. That's what it means. Like rap music nowadays, they don't want you to know. They don't want me as a customer. No.
Well, what do you think of the music industry today? I mean, the way records are made has changed. The way record companies operate has changed. You've got YouTube, you've got streaming services. What do you think of the music industry today? Well,
you know, I'm kind of in it in the streaming world. You know, that's what it became that way. You know, the music business got taken over by the iPhone. You know, now people when we look at the Hermits streaming, most of the countries that send us money didn't even have a stamp when we made the records. You know, you get to what used to be the Belgian Congo. You know, we get royalties from people there. They didn't have a record player. They had no access to rock and roll music. Unfortunately, I'm from a period that's like the Roaring 20s for my parents, seems incredibly more interesting than any period since then. The 60s seems to be able to capture that glamour thing because it had the Beatles and the Monkees and all these different people who kind of, I think, okay, here's the music business. There was Elvis, there was Frank Sinatra, then there was Elvis Presley. I mean, we're not saying that there wasn't an Nat King Cole. We're just saying the people who, Frank Sinatra, Elvis Presley, Beatles, Sex Pistols, Spice Girls. Who's next? It wasn't U2. Who's next? The one that everyone goes, oh yeah. Those were the key. I mean, the Spice Girls, you may not have bought any of their records, but you had to know about them. My mother used to say, if your mom knows the name of the people in the band, then they're famous. You know, really. It's
Yeah, that's true. That's very true. I want to ask you about your hit single, Oh You Pretty Things, written by David Bowie, who also played piano on the track. How did you end up recording his song?
He was skint at the time. He wasn't doing well. He got into some altercation, legal stuff, which I don't know anything about, but he was looking to have some of his new songs recorded. And he thought that Oh You Pretty Things would be a good song for Herman's Hermits because we would be good representatives of singing a song about Oh You Pretty Things. Whatever you want it to mean, because I know what I wanted it to mean. So he came and he played it to us in Mickey's office. Mickey had an office, and it's kind of like a dramatic setup, really. There was Peter Grant, who was Led Zeppelin's manager, sitting on one side, and Mickey Most, who was our producer, my producer, on that side. And you stood in the middle and you showed them what you had, And David Bowie played Oh You Pretty Things on the piano. And he said, I think it's very personable. David was very personable and kind and well-educated and all the things that you need to be in the music business. So Mickey said, it's not a Herman's Hermits single. It should be Peter Noone's first ever solo single. And David was disappointed because I think he thought that Herman's Hermits would sell more records. So everything was simpler. You could go to the studio, you could call all your friends and get them out. So we got Herbie Flowers, who's a bass player, and we got a drummer. I can't remember who the drummer was now. And we all met at the studio with a piano player. And David came because it's his song. He wants to help us fix the song. The piano player can't play it. And we realized that David only plays, this is a long story, I'm sorry, but it only plays the black notes on the piano. An idiosyncrasy, we could call it. It only plays, so it's an F sharp, which is F sharp, E flat. It's got all these great chords that he can only play, and the other guy can't figure it out. We've since figured it out, but he's the only person who could play it. So Mickey says, instead of you showing him how to play it, why don't you just play it? And David said, well, I can't play it all the way through. I don't have the chops to play it all. I'll get tired. So Mickey says, okay, we'll record one section at a time. So, oh, you pretty thing, don't you know? You don't know. And then we'll take that piece and we'll put it in again. Right. And then, so you don't have to play it once properly. And then we'll do that down, 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 down. Wake up, you sleepy heads, that little breakdown. We'll separate that and we'll glue it together. Well, we started to do that. And David, on the second take, played it all the way through perfectly. He played it all the way through.
That's David Bowie.
Neither did the band. They were into it. They were all, you could see they were enjoying playing. Oh, do. And
that's David Bowie for you. I know, Peter, early on in your career, you were offered to replace Tommy Steele on Broadway in Half a Sixpence, but you couldn't do it at that time because Herman's Hermits was such a massive success. It must have been a real thrill for you to finally conquer Broadway in the 80s in The Pirates of Penzance.
Yeah, it was because, a lot of opportunities that would have been good for me weren't good for the group. If I'd have gone and done Half a Sixpence, my group were unemployable. If they weren't playing with me, they were unemployable. So that's something you've got to think about. I say, I think I should do it. It's only $500 a week, but whatever Tommy was getting, we were making $25,000 a night. So I said, and they go, well, what about the guys' mortgages? The managers immediately went dramatic. The guys won't be able to pay for their mortgages. They've all bought cars and houses. And if you do this for a year, or even 6 months, they'll be destitute. So, the managers wanted the 125 grands, not 150s. So it kept getting in the way of opportunities, but I was never going to be negative about the opportunity of being in Herman's Hermits because it was my thing. That's my thing. And, I can share it with the Hermits and with Mickey Most, but it's still my thing. So eventually when I got on Broadway, I will tell you, I did the thing I called all my friends and invited them to Sardi's. on the opening night. And it was great because, I mean, I'd already done the show for a couple of years. I'd done it on the road, and then I went to England. But when I opened in New York on Broadway, Minskop Theatre, you know, with a dressing room with a window, you know, we did the Sardis thing. We walked over there, and of course, nobody at Sardis really made that big a deal out of it because it wasn't really like Richard Burton or Richard Harris or one of those guys. It was just this pop singer is having a party in the private room. But we did the thing, and it was good. A lot of people showed up that I really loved, like Jim Belushi showed up, and Andy Gibb showed up because he was in town, and the lead singer from the Karen Carpenter showed up, and you know, lots of people that I knew and loved all showed up. Yeah.
What a beautiful experience. You married your wife Mireille on your 21st birthday, and you have your beautiful daughter Natalie, who's having a wonderful career. Most people in show business, Peter, especially music stars, have incredibly unstable personal lives, but somehow you defied all the odds. You have a long, happy, successful marriage. How do you account for that?
It's who I am. You know, you can't be somebody else than you know, if you know who you are, you'll be okay in this world. I think, you know, what is my thing? And when people say, you know, I just say, well, I'm just the lead singer. I don't know how to do anything like that. You know, I mean, that's my cop out for anything. This morning I had to call my self-employed IRA, you know, to get the money out of it, because now I've got to take the money out because I'm so old. I've got to take the money out. And, you know, I say to them when they pick up, they go, I say, what do I put here? And you can hear that they're going, what is wrong with this person? How come he doesn't know how to fill in a form? And I say, you have to excuse me, I'm a bit slow at this. I'm a musician. And they go, oh, okay. And they help you fill out the form. Just by saying you're a musician, it means, you know, you're not very smart. So it's a good cop out, and it helps me do my, and I came from a background of people who cared for each other, and, you know, life has its ups and downs and stuff like that. But, you know, they recovered together. And there was never anybody who shot off into space on their own. Everybody sort of, you know, when I went to school, there was this priest that I liked. He was my French teacher. So obviously I can speak French. And he said, you know, what we do is we take care of the people closest to us. Your mother, your father, your sisters, your brothers, you lived a long time before marriage, and your grandmother, and they'll always be paying attention to them. And then when you know that they're all okay, then you can spread it out a little bit.
Not only that, Peter, but you have an extraordinary relationship with your fans who call themselves Noonatics. I am proud to be a Noonatic. Your fans have been incredibly loyal to you for many decades, haven't they?
You know, I'll tell you my story. When I was a kid, me and my sister was a great music fan. She had very good taste in music. We went to see there was a tour, and it was the Everly Brothers, Bo Diddley, the Rolling Stones, and Mickey Most. And we went to see the Everly Brothers. And as we left the theatre we were catching a bus back home. If I took my sister with me, I was allowed to go anywhere. And she was allowed to go anywhere if I was there. So we were walking down this street, Deansgate, to the bus stop. And we passed the stage door, and coming out the stage door, getting on a bus, are the Rolling Stones and some of the musicians and all that. So we stopped, you know, because they're in our way, basically. We'd never connect. We never got an autograph. We're so lame, we never bothered to get autographs. And nobody had a camera. So we stood there, and the Everly Brothers come out. And unlike the Rolling Stones, who just gave us as if we were fans, the Everly Brothers started talking to people. You know, hey, I saw you. Yeah, thanks for coming, mate. And they've got these cute American accents, and they're friendly and personable to each other, to the point that the next day I bought every one of their records, because I'd become not a fan, I became a fanatic. And I realized that if, you know, it's about respect, really. You know, you can't think lunatic is allow yourself to be called a lunatic is pretty interesting. But that was the beginning of it. That was it. And when I met Roy Orbison, the same thing. And over my life, it keeps coming back to haunt you. Like once Tommy James in his book said that he did a concert with Herman, Hermits and the Animals, and Peter Noone was really friendly and came to the dressing room and everything. But, Eric Burdon wasn't very friendly. And I called, I said, Tommy, that's not fair because, Eric isn't that kind of person. He's always been a grumpy old man, and he's my friend. So I don't like you saying that things about my friends. He's all I didn't say anything. Barry just said he didn't say. I said, well, traditionally, I came to your dressing room because it's a tradition in England. You always go and say hello to whoever's on the show because that's the way we do it. And he goes, well, who taught you that tradition? I said, it's the Beatles. We did this show. And the Beatles were on the show, and it was the Beatles. One or two of the Beatles came to our dressing room and said, "Hey, Hermit, great," and that was it. That's all it took. But it's a big deal. It's a big deal. And so Tommy says, "Well, where did they get the tradition from?" So I go, "So probably from Tommy Rowe or somebody from that period there, And I go, find out." So there's a guy called Tony Bramwell who, when you ask Paul McCartney a question, he says, "Ask Tony Bramwell. He was there for everything." I mean, that's his go-to answer. So Tony Bramwell, find out where the Beatles got the tradition of coming and saying hello to her, because they didn't get it in Liverpool. And okay, they did get it in Liverpool. They were playing on a bill with Roy Orbison, and Roy Orbison went up 5 flights of stairs to their dressing room just to welcome them on. See, we thought of Roy Orbison, he was 31. He was an old guy. 5 sets of stairs. 31-year-old, he probably wasn't smoking the bong before he did that. So he set the tradition. And of course, he got the tradition from America. It wasn't a British tradition at all. Roy Orbison probably happened in England that if you did a theatre thing, the lead, Richard Harris, would go and say to all the Camelots, we don't know, but we got the tradition from the Beatles, and they got it from Roy Orbison, and Eric Burdon didn't pick up on it.
Well, I hope you know how much your fans appreciate how dedicated you are to us and how attentive you are. Peter, you've had such a full and a fascinating life. It's been really magical. There was even talk at one time of a stage production based on your life. Will you ever sit down and write a memoir?
Yeah, we did a stage production. It was called My Very Own British Invasion. It ran up off Broadway for a bit, and it was very successful. But then the pandemic came along and closed everything. So that's still sitting out there. I'm working on a memoir. It's like 60 anecdotal stories from the 60s. So they'll all be 4 or 5 paragraphs.
When can we expect that book to come out? I've been working with a ghost on it, so probably I don't know how long it takes. We still don't have a deal for it. They're trying to shop it for a deal, but it's a good idea, and it's not a live story thing. It's like Peter Noone meets Elvis, meet the Beatles, and I tell a story about me meeting the Beatles backstage and George Martin asking me, "What am I even doing here?" and stuff like that. They're all kind of. There's a lot of self-deprecation in the Herman Peter Noone world, where I make seem frivolous things that are very important, but they're important. If I remember them, they're obviously important. Like I remember meeting the Queen Mother, and did a Royal Command performance, and she liked my suit. It's interesting that she even noticed, and I said, Mom, called her Mom in those days. Mom, the suit is made in England, but the fabric is French. Like sharing with her that it was like not 100% British stuff. Oh, because I'd been voted best dressed man in the world 2 years in a row. And her son-in-law, Tony Armstrong Jones, was he'd won it as well. So that's where the suit thing came out. He was in the suit world, fashion world. And that's nice. I said, yeah. And I said, the thing was made in French. She said, "Oh, yes, your wife is from France, isn't she?" And I go,
My God, how many hours must she sit reading the biographies of every one of these people on the show? And Tom Jones was next to me, you know, and I was standing between Tom Jones and Andy Williams. I mean, how good does it get? You know what I mean? It's a big day for me.
I cannot wait for this book to come out, and I hope you do more than 60 anecdotes, because you've had an unbelievable life.
Well, I'll let you help me choose the 60 anecdotes, but you got Elvis, Beatles, Monkeys, they're all in there, you know, Tommy James, everybody that I've ever come across that I've met. I have an anecdotal story like Johnny Cash, and, you know, all people see. And on my radio show, I only play songs by people that I like. I only talk about people that I like, which fabulously for me, that's a lot of people that I like.
And everybody loves you. Everybody loves you, Peter. You have an amazing sense of humor. You're incredibly humble. You don't take yourself too seriously. You have no ego. That's why everybody loves you.
When I came into this entertainment business, the shadow of Dick Van Dyke, Danny Kaye, even Tommy Steele, and the Beatles and Elvis Presley, you better learn humility. And, you know, humility is being willing to listen. I'm always willing to listen. What have you got? Let's hear it. And there you go. So humble that was a big shadow. So you have to be unique. It's like I say to everybody, no, you have to be unique. Otherwise, no one will notice you. The Who aren't like the Beatles. And the Stones aren't like the Who. And Herman's Hermits aren't like the Beatles, who aren't like the Who, and aren't like, we have to be unique. And there was a lot of people on the Herman's Hermits chain. I mean, the Monkeys are on the Herman's Hermits chain, and the Cowsills, and all those people who got a few hit songs and were cute and pop stars. I wanted to be an entertainer. I never wanted to be the cute pop star, even though I wanted to be an entertainer. And I spent my life learning how to do it.
Well, let me tell you, you didn't just learn, you're a master craftsman. I want to tell our viewers that you can find out everything that's happening with Peter Noone, see his concert schedule, join his fan club, and buy lots of cool merchandise by going to his official website, peternoone.com. Well, Mr. Peter Noone, it's been such a joy to meet you and have this opportunity to chat with you about your amazing life and career. You're one of the most likable, sincere, humble, and talented human beings I've ever met. I've enjoyed every single moment of our time together.
Well, thank you for all those nice compliments there, but I better cut now before I start lying to you.
Well, thank you for all the music and the joy you've brought to your millions of fans. Promise me you will never retire. And thank you for taking the time to come on our show.
10 more years.
Okay, I'll be there at every single concert if it's up in the northern end of the country.
Okay, great. Well, I look forward to seeing you. Come and say hello next time you come to a concert.
December 3rd, Riviera Theater, North Tonawanda, Buffalo.
Okay, I'll see you there. Make sure Jana puts you on the guest list.
Oh, thank you, Peter. Our guest has been the legendary Peter Noone. My name is Harvey Brownstone. Thank you to our producer, Steve Silver. Thank you to my wonderful managers in LA, Rick and Robin Marcelli, and to my entire team in the UK. Thank you all for joining us. See you next time.
You take care of yourself. I'll see you in North Tonawanda.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to check out all the great interviews on the Harvey Brownstone Interviews YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified when new videos are posted.